Clayton Thomas-Müller of the Indigenous Environmental Network discusses the internationalization of the campaign to stop the assault on Indigenous peoples by the tar sands projects in Alberta, Canada. The interview was conducted at Fort McMurray Airport on the 27th of September 2010.
So I'm talking with Clayton Thomas-Müller with the Indigenous Environmental Network. And you're from Winnipeg, Clayton?
Pugatawagan Cree Nation, Northern Manitoba.
In Northern Manitoba, which is Treaty 5.
Treaty 6.
Treaty 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've been leading up the campaign, the Indigenous Environmental Network's campaign on the tar sands, which have particularly devastating effects on Native people, especially the people living off the land, the hunting, trapping, political economy that has been viable in this region until just a few years ago. Can you tell us about what you're seeing on the land with Indigenous people and how you're interpreting this for people who are very interested, for instance, in London, England, where you've been recently?
Yeah, well, I think that, part of the challenge is, especially here in the province of Alberta, is a complete failure on the part of the state recognizing their own laws. And what I'm referring to, of course, is First Nations title, Aboriginal and treaty rights, and simple constitutionally protected rights, like, for example, the duty to consult. Here in Canada, with precedent-setting decisions, first Mikisew, then Wet'suwet'en, then Dalgamuk, now Haida Gwaii. We have a scenario where corporations or provincial government entities, regulatory bodies, must consult at the very earliest conception of a thought that would impact treaty or traditional territories.
So you talk about this court struggle to coming up with this position of the judiciary that there must be consultation. Can you put that in context a bit? Like, people fought for that for years and years.
Yeah, I mean, all across this country, the onus has always been on First Nations to prove their case. With the government of Canada being the judge, jury, and executioner. Well, they have proved their case. And there's been a succession of court cases, specifically around the duty to consult on the part of the Crown and outside forces, essentially, to consult with First Nations people. And so the problem that we live in today is that these things are not enforced, especially here in the province of Alberta, where cash rules everything. Where you have 20 major private international oil companies operating here in Canada's tar sands. There's a big issue. And consultation is happening at the end of the decision versus at the very beginning. And so, the federal government has been complacent in this complete erosion of treaty rights and this complete disregard for Canadian law, and all of this has been, at the whim of industry's needs, wishes, and wants. And of course of U.S. energy consumption, U.S. energy policy. And so, part of the work that the Indigenous Environmental Network has been doing has been to internationalize the struggle of communities like the community of Fort Chipewyan. But the complete, disregard of the federal government on all of this stuff and just their total absence here in Canada's tar sands. Community affiliates that IEN works with, like the community of Fort Chipewyan, that's located 250 kilometers downstream from Fort McMurray Boomtown, where we're now sitting, have requested support to internationalize their struggle. The tar sands development is one of global significance. It represents one of those major tipping point catastrophes in the context of climate change. It represents, massive human rights violations, not only for frontline Indigenous communities and rural communities here in northern Alberta that are living with the toxic impacts of this development, but for coastal dependent, forest dependent peoples across the world over that whose lives are being impacted by climate change. And and it also represents, really the true nature of the energy crisis, because what's happening here at Fort McMurray is really cannibalism. Let's look at Saudi Arabia, for example. For every unit of energy they put into the ground to extract oil in Saudi Arabia, they get back 100 units of energy. Here in Fort McMurray, for every unit of energy they put into extracting bitumen out of the tar sands, they get back maybe 4 to 6 units of energy, and sometimes even less than that. So what it represents is really, that last gasping breath of the fossil fuel regime. What's sad about that, though, is that all of these pipelines that they're planning to build across continental North America, like the Keystone XL, the Enbridge Gateway, and others, all represent that particular sector's hardwiring of their economy, their economic paradigm onto North America for the next 150 years. And at a time when we should be investing billions in renewable energy resources, in conservation strategies, and precautionary based bioregional economic planning, there's $100 billion put into tar sands. And what's more horrifying is that this is truly ground zero. Many First Nations peoples from Fort Chipewyan, they describe their community as ground zero for tar sands impacts. Well, Canada is ground zero for the launch of heavy oil development, the technology to do so all across the planet. And so it's a global fight. And so when it asked to help with internationalizing the struggle of the people of Fort Chip and other First Nations like Beaver Lake, like Fort McMurray First Nation, Prairie Chipewyan, and other tribal groups impacted by tar sands infrastructure, the UK presented an excellent strategic opportunity because of the fact that 3 of the UK's major banking institutions, including the UK's biggest bank, the Royal Bank of Scotland, are all heavily financing tar sands proponents. And with the recent global economic downturn, there's a tremendous opportunity to pressure particularly the Royal Bank of Scotland, who got bailed out by taxpayers' money and is now 84% owned by the UK Treasury. And so a bank that's 84% publicly owned, investing in the world's most destructive mining and energy projects, while citizens of the UK, we felt, should have a say in that. And so we've been involved with a massive effort in the United Kingdom to target the banks and to get them out of fossil fuel financing, to get them out of heavy carbon-intensive financing, and to steer them towards a direction of investment in renewable energy. And the other targets in the United Kingdom, of course, represented by your global majors that have offices there, and I'm speaking about Shell and BP. And both these companies, Shell being the more entrenched of the two, have great economic interests in the Athabasca tar sands patch, and BP is the new kid on the block, and recently made a bunch of acquisitions here in the tar sands, including a 50-50 joint partnership with the Canadian, or the I believe it's Tokyo-based Husky Energy Corporation. It used to be a Canadian company, but it got sold. Now, the Sunrise project is an in situ project, which is the worst of the worst in terms of CO2 intensity and water usage. And BP's rolling full tilt with that. So we've been running a brand damage campaign in the United Kingdom, embarrassing BP, showing up at their AGM, calling out Tony Hayward, the former CEO, and really just putting pressure on BP to stay the hell out of the tar sands. And they're vulnerable right now, especially with the fallout of one of the world's worst ecological disasters that happened under their watch. Of course, I'm speaking about the Gulf of Mexico and the Deepwater Horizon blowout. And it was interesting, I was in